picture? All right, we're organized. I just want to take a moment to admire the foliage. And we're just really hoping that it isn't carnivorous, because we could have like an Feed Me Seymour situation happening up here. But anyway, kudos to the event planners for that. My name is Jana Ganion. I'm the Senior Advisor for Offshore Wind in the Office of the Governor, and it is my distinct honor and pleasure to lead this Tribal Nations panel. With me, we have Chairperson Jason Ramos from the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe. We have, woo, that's worthy of applause. We have Sam Cohen, Government Affairs and Legal Officer from the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. And we have Jaclyn Robinson, the West Coast Tribal Relations Lead from Vineyard Offshore. So today, what we're really talking about is strategies for workforce and economic enterprise development. And we want to hear about tribal nation leadership, tribal affairs, on strategies for workforce, economic enterprise development in tribal nations and beyond, and applications for offshore wind, energy infrastructure, supply chain, and in other sectors. We'll discuss pathways for innovative collaborations, partnerships with the private sector, labor, and other partners, and solutions for apprenticeships, workforce training, and other workforce and economic development considerations. So, without further ado, let's start with economic development. We'll start with Chair Ramos, we'll go to Jaclyn, and then we'll go to Sam. Chair Ramos, from your experience and expertise, what are some of the success stories and supportive policies for tribal nation economic enterprise development? It could be related to offshore wind, energy, other economy enabling infrastructure, or in other economic development spaces.
Okay, yep. Well, I think we should start off the conversation with to put it in context, economic development in context for tribes in the North Coast. And you know, what you really have to know is that, you know, there was gold mining on the North Coast, there was timber industry on the North Coast, there was an illicit marijuana industry on the North Coast. When you look at the North Coast, it was one of the last places that settlers found. It wasn't really discovered until 1850. People came for gold, and in every one of those industries, it was extractive, and it did environmental damage. So, you know, when the gold miners came, they hydromined the rivers, disrupted fish populations, which is really near and dear to our hearts. Later, the Timber and Stone Act of 1878 gave away a lot of our land to timber barons who bought the land for $2 an acre. They had proxy buyers, and a lot of that land was ours and was really stolen. A lot of environmental damage in and around the timber industry for 100 years. They got better in the 1970s, and it's a different industry today, and I recognize that. A lot of our natural resources, old growth redwood, were extracted and sold. And that was some of our traditional houses and canoes were built from those old growth trees. And then later on, it was marijuana up until a few years ago. And so, you know, that industry was illicit, did a tremendous amount of environmental damage, a lot of pesticides, a lot of stolen water. And in each and every case, the industries left or were downsized, and we were left to try to clean it up. So, you know, it's also of note that when you get to the northern part of the state, you know, these are counties that are the poorest counties in California. So you look at Humboldt County, median income Humboldt County, $45,000 a year with 20% poverty rate. Our neighboring county, Trinity County, is the poorest county in the state. So to put that in perspective, you go to Marin County, median income $140,000, virtually no poverty rate. So that's the context in which I like to start the conversation in and around economic development. I think tribes have been extremely successful in economic development where we can. There's not a lot of resource or capital to really launch forward with some of our economic strategies, and we end up having to kind of get a capital stack together where we use some tribal governmental gaming money, a lot of grants to try to finish those projects. So I do believe that there's a tremendous possibility for tribes to partner with different industries. We enjoy unique tax advantages, business structures. I think there's real possibility there, and we're kind of engaged in that right now. So it's a tremendous potential. I think it's an untapped potential, and I think that in the state that it largely goes unutilized. So I'm looking forward to offshore wind. We put it in the context of our history and our lessons of the past, that it has to be done in a way that protects the environment, that we do rigorous study, that we understand tribal ecological knowledge, and that's part of it. And those are all things that Cal Poly Humboldt and the Schatz Energy Research Center are doing now, along with their POWSI group. So we're bullish on the idea. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but getting back to your question, I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think that tribes occupy a unique space for economic development, and we're kind of looking forward to what that looks like with offshore wind development.
Fantastic, thank you. Jaclyn, leaning into both your current role and your expertise as a planner, what are some of the foundational elements or policies that you've seen throughout your career as basically an economy enabling supports to build tribal economic enterprise?
Yes. Well, prior to taking the job as the tribal lead for Vineyard Offshore, I was the planning director for the tribe for several years, and actually coming out of high school, I started in the planning department. So over the years, I've seen the tribes kind of do things that actually work to spur economic prosperity in the communities, and I've witnessed some things that haven't worked. When we look at successes, I think it's good to look at building on the tribe's strengths, making sure they have inventory of their resources, and then building upon that, what suits them best. Many tribes are in rural areas. The Hoopa tribe's located about 50 miles inland in a very rural area, one road in. So when you're looking at, types of things to be sold and how you're going to export it, you have to look at the area in which you reside, and every tribe's going to be unique and special. I think also you have to have a strong foundation. A lot of times outside organizations are not familiar with tribal policies and law, so educating and working with different organizations to provide that knowledge is important. I know what the Hoopa tribe had done was create a set of business codes to attract businesses on the reservation to want to do business. So those are the types of things that I think are successful, but all tribes are unique. So I really think it's important for tribes to kind of do a self-assessment, dive into what they have, and then build upon what they're able to offer the outside businesses and people for partnerships.
Fantastic, thank you. Sam, same question. Economic enterprise development.
So you probably don't know this, but I'm one of the few surviving tribal tax lawyers in the state of California, possibly in the United States. All right? And I did get an advanced tax degree from NYU, which makes me so boring that people stop breathing when I'm in the room. That's how bad it is. But it has enabled Ynez Chumash to create a variety of business development entities We started with tribal limited liability companies, since the tribe's the sole owner, and therefore it's not considered a taxable entity. And then we went to Section 17 corporations, which I say it's like the Battleship Missouri of corporations. It doesn't turn very well, all right? But it's impossible to sink, all right? It takes an act of Congress to dissolve a Section 17 corporation. So we, at Chumash, started with marine protected areas. We were totally left out of that process and chased the process for about 10 years. And then we worked on Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, which national marine sanctuaries actually are growth opportunities for the communities that are in them. And now we were kind of had wind foist upon us by BOEM. And now we have 3 leases, the Morro Bay leases, for 2 foreign corporations and 1 domestic corporation. And then the Morro Bay leases have 2 different corporations that have the leases. So our tribe is trying to partner with at least the Morro Bay lessees so that we can better assess the environmental impacts of offshore wind and participate in the process from the very beginning, as opposed to reading some environmental document at the end of the process. And to do this, we established the Ynez Chumash Oceanographic Institute, which is our 501c3. And so we hire contract oceanographers and marine scientists to help us unpack some of the information that we will receive from the lessees someday. But to be honest, there's no information from any of the Morro Bay lessees yet, except for a small study on bat behavior. So if you're looking for a children's book on bats, there is one out there for the Christmas season, so don't despair. So anyway, and that's Equinor and Atlas who published that, so you should ask them. The other 2 lessees are not in the process of any kind of environmental work, so we haven't been able to partner with them on any kind of infrastructure development. But let me put this out there. You know, for too long, we have been working with the Morro Bay lessees, and the Humboldt tribes have been working with the Humboldt lessees. But in my opinion, and just my opinion, we're not getting anywhere with this approach. So I would personally like to see a tribal nonprofit, or at least a tribal entity, that could co-manage these offshore wind facilities and maybe even be a partial owner in these offshore wind facilities so that tribes could kind of bake themselves into the process and not be outsiders as we currently are.
Thank you. Chair, I'm going to turn back to you in a second, but I just want to build on some of the things that you mentioned, Sam. So in a lot of the literature around economic development or economic enterprise development for tribes, it talks about how structurally things are set up, some best practices around governance structures, and then kind of the balance of the economic enterprise ecosystem, things like educational opportunities, things like training centers, things like, they kind of sometimes fall into workforce development, but it's also things like Section 17 corporations, the ability to develop limited liability partnerships and things like that. So kind of to bridge into our next question, which is to talk more about workforce development. Chair, do you want to just talk about some of the ways in which you see economic enterprise best practices as being some of those that are successful, and then also sort of bridging into what the tribe is doing around workforce development and education?
Sure thing. So yeah, in Blue Lake, we do have a Section 17 corporation, and in that Section 17, you got to remember that Section 17s were originally in the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act. That's where you go to find the paragraph, and in order to create a Section 17, you actually pass a tribal resolution and write a letter to the Secretary of Interior. It's kind of a weird process. And not a lot is really known about Section 17s, but I mean, it's been tested in IRS tax court. We had a case there where we won. So it's solid, but it's a little clunky for, our business partners, right? So we have a light manufacturing company called Wood Labs that we have in our Section 17, and we're really trying to open a microgrid company. That's kind of in development. It's going to take a few years. In and around workforce development, we are almost through phase 1 of the TAM Resilience Center, which is a workforce development training center. Nice big building. Phase 2 has a design makerspace lab. So that's in the works, and it ties in really to our educational efforts. We have a robust tribal education agency, the STEM education. We're going to try to link those both, job training and apprenticeship programs. We get a little money, philanthropy money from the Irvine Foundation to really kind of kickstart apprenticeship programs. And we really see it as a networked whole division of effort. So what I'm really saying there is that the different divisions of our tribal government all have the same strategy, that we link with the Humboldt County Office of Education. We work closely with Cal Poly, Humboldt, and CR to really, right, we don't want to duplicate efforts, and we want to find our place in the kind of workforce development training pipeline. And really, we're in a place with limited resources. We have to leverage all of that. So we've had a long relationship with our educational institutions and with the county. We're kind of pushing forward. Phase 1 will be done in July. We'll move right into phase 2, but I think we can start that conversation. I know we are doing that now, to try to figure out what it's going to look like, not just for our own tribal memberships, but you got to remember, this training center is going to be for everybody in the Mad River Valley and a lot of non-tribal members, right? So we got to figure out how we're going to do that right, and figure out how that we leverage our strengths together throughout the county to really do it the right way and do it the most efficient way.
Great, thank you. Jaclyn, I'm going to turn to you. As we kind of shift from economic enterprise into workforce development, are there initiatives underway from either from your prior role or your current role that the audience can learn from? And then are there any gaps or barriers you see to really doing a very productive job of spinning up workforce development in tribal nations for tribal members and in tribal communities? Like, what kinds of things do we really need to work on here?
Yes, good question. Well, VO, first off, recognizes and respects the importance of tribal sovereignty. We know that this process is going to be a very long haul, and making sure that we have those good partnerships and understanding of tribes' needs and priorities is a high priority to us as a developer and company. So we've taken it upon of ourselves to really get out there and get to know the tribes. In addition, we're working with our local communities and educational institutions. We've partnered with Cal Poly Humboldt and the Pacific Offshore Wind Consortium to work on those higher ed kind of 4-year degrees for offshore wind as an option. We're also looking at working with our various trade groups for the pre-apprenticeship programs, because we see that as another opportunity. And we're also supporting some of the local nonprofits that we feel can kind of fill some of these gaps that we don't have locally, as this is a new industry coming into Humboldt County. So Nationally, there's Oceanic, which is, focusing on supply chain in order to get the information out to communities and start networking and building these networks between tribes, outside businesses, and other local business and community. We've been supporting the local effort and development of WindLink, who will be the local supplier in Humboldt, supply chain developer and supplier, to get people kind of connected. So I think it's important just to get to know who your community is, the tribes, tribal governments, what businesses are there. We participate in a lot of the local Chamber of Commerce's in the various communities, just to get to know who those businesses are and what they may offer, so that when we're out in tribal communities, we might help link some of those different opportunities with the training center or what they're selling or promoting. I think that's really important. And then it just, some of the gaps and barriers, again, is education and just getting people to know, what are some of those important things to tribes, because a lot of times, like, financing on reservations is very hard, and lending in some of these institutions for business loans on tribes are hard. So working with, like, your local small business development center is going to be important, and making sure that tribes are kind of making sure their finances are kind of all in order for these types of bigger joint ventures or partnerships. So we're active in serving as a resource when we're out there working with the communities and the various partners that we see on a daily basis in tribes.
Terrific, thank you. Sam, I want to turn to you around the workforce development piece. We've talked a little bit in past conversations about the High Road Training Partnership, but I was wondering if you could just offer your thoughts about how that program worked, what kinds of additional resources that we might think about for that program or others, and the ways in which you're thinking about how to move tribal members through these programs into good-paying, highly skilled jobs. If you don't mind.
Thank you, Jana. At Chumash, the government has made some great decisions about education, and every tribal member who's a lineal descendant up to a certain level gets a full ride college scholarship, including up to 2 graduate degrees, and we pay all their living expenses while they're in graduate school. So I got lawyers, I got doctors, all right? But I don't really have offshore wind technicians, all right? But I have these educated people who I need to encourage to come back to the reservation or come back close to the reservation. And I think offshore wind is going to be the key, both for highly skilled jobs and for kind of workman-like jobs. And so we partnered with the High Road Training Partnership with a smaller company called Sierco Floventus. And we created a 2-year curriculum with Allen Hancock College to train wind workers. And then we had internships at the Tribal Administration Building. I had 3 wind interns. So I had 1 intern checking out Vineyard Energy the whole summer. Yes. So yeah, because don't forget, Vineyard is the only tribal benefit agreement in the entire United States for these big leases. We did a small community benefit agreement with Cademo, but that was only for like 4 to 6 wind facilities. So, I mean, it's not the same as these big leases in Morro Bay or in Humboldt. So we're hoping to be the next next staffing for these offshore wind, and either through Allen Hancock College as a 2-year degree, or maybe we can get Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is our closest Cal Poly, interested in this kind of 4-year degree, or maybe even certificate program, so that we can take these highly educated Chumash people and keep them in town as highly skilled offshore wind technicians.
Fantastic, thank you. So in our last few minutes together, I think I'm going to go off script. and as we're wont to do in these tribal panels. In this moment where there's so much to do and there's a lot of additional uncertainty, what kinds of things in the economic development spaces or really governance spaces, any other things, are bubbling up for you as the highest priorities? And maybe just what kinds of paths forward do you see through some of those issues?
You sure you want me to go off script? All right, here we go.
Are you bubbling?
Here we go. Yeah, so I really want to mention, and Sam, I'm glad you brought it up. At the BLR, we also have educational programs for tribal members where they can. It used to not be capped. Now it's capped at $250,000 for higher education. It pays for books, tuition, living expenses, and we also have it's the BLR Gene Levitt Scholarship up at Cal Poly Humboldt Schatz Energy Research Center. It's $15,000 for two. Well, it's 30, I guess. It's two students at $15,000, and we have a couple of our own team, tribal office team members that are in that program getting master's degrees. So that's important. The education component is important. I think that what we should be doing is, and my view is, look, I know that some folks in the crowd are a little upset with the current administration and disappointed at the way things are going. Now you're in our boat. If you're a tribal government, you're used to being let down by the federal government. So,
Well, Secretary Burgum did say that the tribal chairperson is the hardest job there is, so on some level,
yeah.
they get it.
Yeah, and look, there's going to be opportunity there. For us, I'm not just talking down to them. It's a big group, right? The federal government's big. It's got a lot of different components to it. I think what we should be doing is what we're doing, right? We got to get our educational components together. We've got to figure out supply chain. We've got to figure out port development. We've got to figure out job training. And so, I think there's unique opportunities for investment in and around our Section 17s. There's still going to be tax credits. I think they're on the Hill right now. We believe that some of our benefit will be brought back, but there'll still be some significant advantages in and around partnership and the ability to get those tax credits. The good news is with the IRS that they fully recognize now that tribal LLCs are non-taxed entities. Believe it or not, we used to have single-member LLCs where the tribe was a single member because we know that can't be attacked, but they've come out and recognize that now in some rulemaking, which makes it, for partnership investment with tribes, it makes it attractive for companies. So I think we build those relationships. We continue with job training. We didn't mention our union partners. In Blue Lake, we have the Local 49 Hospitality Union. We have an agreement. You can get agreements. Unions can get agreements with tribes that respect tribal sovereignty. I know that because I've done it. And I know that moving forward, that the union folks in the room have apprenticeship programs. We got to bring those guys in and to be part of the conversation to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. And yeah, there's a little bit of a pause, but it gives us an opportunity to really do some of the heavy lifting and hard work now.
Perfect, thank you. Sam, we'll go to you, and Jaclyn, you'll be our closer.
All right. So we were all shocked when Trump did his executive order torpedoing, for lack of a better word, offshore wind. And I guess the question is, what are we going to do for 4 years? Personally, I like cruising myself. So we can take 4 years and cruise. Or we could do what California does best and lead alternative energy and commercialize wind, because it's not going to happen without the leadership of California And it's not going to happen with without the leadership of California tribes. So San Ynez puts it out there that we'll partner with anyone if we can help work towards moving California wind forward. And I can only volunteer myself, and I lost 10 pounds, so you're getting less of me every day. But yeah, I think we need to get on top of this and make this a productive 4 years so that at the end of 4 years, no matter what happens, we're well placed with offshore wind, which we didn't expect much to happen in 4 years, to be honest. But we won't be behind at the end of this 4-year period.
Thank you so much. Jaclyn, bring us home.
Well, as a tribal lead, my role is specifically working with tribes, and I work with 22 tribes, 18 in Northern California, and then we have 4 in Washington. And the biggest thing that I hear from tribes is wanting to be involved in the process and the development process of offshore wind. Unfortunately, many tribes just lack the tribal capacity to be able to participate and be at the table. And so VO really is playing an active role in elevating tribal voices and making sure that they do have a seat at the table and that their voices are being heard. So for the next 4 years, I'll be working with tribes and local organizations and community to help try and develop some type of a tribal capacity fund to support tribes to be at the table. Because without tribes' involvement in the process, I don't see it moving as smoothly as it could or should. So that'll be our priority, and we're actively pursuing options and opportunities in that field.
Please join me in a round of applause for our fantastic panel. Thank you so much.